It is early 1942. The U.S. military is scrambling to recover from the devastation at Pearl Harbor, leaving the mainland exposed. Across the Atlantic, Adolf Hitler sees an opening. He orders a campaign of domestic sabotage designed to strike fear directly into the American public. To execute this plan, German naval intelligence launched a small fleet of U-boats across the Atlantic. These submarines spent weeks prowling just off the American East Coast, entirely undetected by U.S. defenses. Just after midnight on June 13th, the fog was so thick you could barely see the shoreline of Amagansett, Long Island. A four-man team paddled out of the dark surf in a small rubber raft, dragging heavy wooden crates packed with high explosives onto the sand. Their mission, codenamed Operation Pastorius, targeted the infrastructure driving the U.S. war effort. They planned to bomb hydroelectric dams, railway bridges, and massive aluminum plants operating in New York, Tennessee, and Illinois. Aluminum was the vital ingredient for building warplanes. By taking out these specific facilities, the saboteurs intended to starve the assembly lines and ground the American aviation pipeline before the planes could even be built. If they succeeded, they would be the first foreign combatants to wage war on the U.S. mainland in 130 years. The strike would cripple wartime production and paralyze the country from within. But almost immediately, the plan hit a snag. Out of the dense fog walked John Cullen, an unarmed 21-year-old Coast Guardsman on a routine beach patrol. He stumbled right into the saboteurs as they were burying their gear. The team leader, George Dasch, tried to talk his way out of it. He shoved $260 into Cullen's hand, a hefty bribe in 1942, and told him to forget what he saw. Cullen took the money, nodded calmly, and then sprinted 2 miles through the dark to his Coast Guard station to sound the alarm. Within hours, armed guardsmen were sweeping the beach. That single, tense conversation stripped the operation of its secrecy. The spies were ashore, but the clock was already ticking. When investigators dug into the sand dunes at Amagansett, they unearthed a trove of damning evidence. They found the heavy wooden crates filled with TNT, timing devices, and duffel bags stuffed with German Navy uniforms, discarded so the spies could blend in as civilians. When word reached Washington, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover mobilized his agents immediately. He ordered the largest domestic manhunt in the history of the Bureau to track down the missing men. The situation escalated rapidly. Just 4 days later, a second German U-boat breached the surface off Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida, dropping 4 more saboteurs into the country to link up with the New York team. These men were selected specifically because they spoke English and had lived in America before the war. Armed with counterfeit draft cards and social security numbers, they boarded trains, checked into hotels, and slipped seamlessly into the crowd. The FBI was flying blind. They knew 8 heavily funded enemy agents were operating inside the country, but they had absolutely no idea who they were looking for or where the first bomb was going to detonate. But instead of initiating the attacks, the saboteurs went shopping. George Dasch and his second-in-command, Ernest Berger, wandered the streets of New York, ate at nice restaurants, and suddenly found themselves nostalgic for their old lives in the States. They started having second thoughts about killing Americans. Dasch made a decision that would derail the entire operation. He abandoned the rest of the team, hopped a train to Washington, D.C., checked into a hotel, and started calling the FBI, repeatedly trying to confess to a massive terror plot. At first, the agents on the phone thought he was a crank, so Dasch walked directly into FBI headquarters, sat down with an assistant director, and dropped $84,000 in cash on the desk. That was the mission's operating budget, and it was all the proof the FBI needed. Internal betrayal dismantled the entire operation before a single fuse could be lit. While the FBI publicly claimed credit for a counterintelligence victory, the threat had actually been neutralized by the very men tasked with carrying it out. President Franklin D. Roosevelt was livid. The enemy had easily breached American shores, and he feared a civilian jury might get bogged down in procedural rules or hand down lenient sentences for a crime he viewed as a direct act of war. To ensure maximum severity, Roosevelt issued a sweeping executive order. He then established a secret 7-man military commission to prosecute the saboteurs, effectively locking them out of the civilian justice system and stringing away their standard legal rights. The administration justified this by classifying the spies as unlawful combatants.
Because the men had buried their military uniforms and operated in civilian clothing, they violated the laws of war, losing their right to be treated as standard prisoners of war or regular criminal defendants. The defense team fought back, taking the case directly to the Supreme Court. In a highly accelerated session known as ex parte querin, the court sided with the president, rapidly ruling that the military tribunal was entirely lawful. This ruling handed the executive branch a powerful new tool. It demonstrated that during a time of total war, the government was fully prepared to redraw the boundaries of constitutional law to secure the homeland. Justice moved ruthlessly fast. On August 8, 1942, weeks after they landed in the United States, 6 of the German saboteurs were executed in the electric chair on the 3rd floor of the District of Columbia jail. George Dasch and Ernest Berger were spared the death penalty solely because they had turned the others in. Both received lengthy prison sentences instead and were eventually deported back to Germany in 1948. For decades, the ex parte querin decision sat quietly in the archives of American law. But in the aftermath of September 11th, the government resurrected it to justify the use of military commissions for holding and trying foreign terrorism suspects. The 1942 Supreme Court ruling established the critical precedent for modern military commissions. This legal foundation provides the pathway utilized today to prosecute suspected terrorists outside the civilian court system.